Picture this scene, if you will. It's the winter of 1835, and the wind is howling across the Wyoming Territory like nature's own death rattle. Fort Laramie stands as a tiny outpost of civilization in an ocean of wilderness that could swallow a man whole and never burp. The trading post is packed with the usual suspects: fur trappers smelling of wood smoke and bear grease, missionaries clutching their Bibles like life preservers, and soldiers trying to pretend they're not terrified of what lurks beyond those wooden walls. And then he walks in. Imagine the most unsettling thing you've ever seen walk through a door. Now multiply that by 10. The figure that emerges from the Montana wilderness moves with the fluid grace of a predator. But there's something fundamentally wrong about him. This is Jeremiah Johnson, and he carries with him the metallic scent of fresh blood, not on his clothes, mind you, but radiating from his very being like some primitive cologne. The room falls silent. You know that kind of silence, the kind that precedes either violence or revelation. Johnson's beard is stained crimson, not from wine or berry juice, but from something far more disturbing. He moves to the center of the room with the casual confidence of a man who has never questioned his place in the world, reaches into his pack, and produces something that makes hardened frontiersmen recoil in horror. It's an elk heart, raw, still glistening. Now, we're talking about men who have seen things that would give modern folks nightmares for years. These are individuals who've watched scalping parties work their craft, who've seen what a grizzly bear can do to a human body, who've survived winters that killed half their companions. But watching Jeremiah Johnson slice portions of raw heart with a bone knife while maintaining casual conversation, that's something else entirely. The traders are retching, the missionaries are crossing themselves so frantically they might wear holes in their foreheads. And the local doctor, Thomas Whitfield, a man who's seen more gore than a battlefield surgeon, watches in horrified fascination as Johnson's body shows absolutely none of the violent rejection that should accompany such consumption. This isn't some carnival act, folks. This isn't a man trying to shock people for attention. Johnson eats that raw meat the way you or I might eat an apple. Casually. Naturally. Like it's the most normal thing in the world. But how did we get here? How does a man from civilized New Jersey become something that looks like it crawled out of humanity's prehistoric past? Jeremiah Johnson was born in 1824 in New Jersey, about as far from the wild frontier as you could get and still be in America. He was just a regular kid who grew up to be just a regular young man. Nothing in his early years suggested he'd become the stuff of nightmares and legends. He served with distinction in the Mexican-American War, and here's where the story gets interesting. You see, more soldiers died from disease and starvation than from Mexican bullets. Army rations were a joke hardtack that could break teeth, salt pork that might or might not be pork, and provisions that went bad faster than milk in August. Johnson watched good men waste away from scurvy and dysentery, while the enemy they could fight sat across the battlefield, healthy and well-fed. That experience planted seeds. Dark seeds. After the war, like thousands of others, Johnson headed west. Gold fever, they called it. But it was more than that. It was the promise of unlimited freedom, of a place where a man could remake himself according to his own rules rather than society's expectations. The transformation began subtly, first trying native pemmican, which was basically concentrated survival food made from dried meat, fat, and berries. Then sampling raw fish with French voyageurs who knew how to live off the land in ways that would make modern survivalists weep with envy. Each step prepared his body for something unprecedented, something that would make him a legend. The dramatic confrontation that established his reputation happened at Fort Bridger. Picture 7 drunk soldiers, men who'd fought in wars, men who'd killed other men with their bare hands, deciding they were going to force this weird mountain man to eat civilized food. Maybe they thought they were doing him a favor. Maybe they were just drunk and mean. Doesn't matter. Johnson's response became the stuff of frontier legend. He defeated all 7 soldiers in hand-to-hand combat while continuing to chew raw venison, not after he finished eating, not before the fight started. During the fight, while punching and kicking and throwing grown men around like children, he kept methodically chewing his dinner. Word of that incident spread through the frontier faster than a prairie fire. But here's what most people missed beneath that savage exterior, was a strategic mind calculating every advantage his shocking diet provided. No cooking fires to reveal his position to enemies, no dependency on supply lines that could be cut, no time wasted gathering firewood or preparing meals, and perhaps most crucially, the devastating psychological impact on enemies who witnessed him consume raw flesh in the middle of battle. Imagine being a warrior, thinking you're the toughest thing on two legs, and watching your opponent casually eat raw meat while fighting for his life. That kind of thing gets into your head, makes you question everything you thought you knew about the natural order. But this is just the beginning of Jeremiah Johnson's story, because what transformed him from an unusual mountain man into something truly terrifying was tragedy. Personal, devastating tragedy that would reshape not just how he lived, but how he thought about life and death itself. And that tragedy would lead him down a path so dark, so unprecedented, that even other mountain men, men who lived by rules most civilized folks couldn't comprehend, would look at him with something approaching awe. What happened next would make this scene at Fort Laramie look like a church social. The murder changes everything. It's 1847, and Jeremiah Johnson is 50 miles away from his cabin near the Musselshell River, trading pelts at a remote outpost. He's been gone 3 days, just long enough to conduct business and start the journey home to his pregnant Flathead wife, Swan. 3 days that will haunt him for the rest of his unnaturally long life. When he crests the hill overlooking his homestead, the silence hits him first. No smoke from the chimney, no movement around the cabin. And then he sees the ravens, dozens of them, circling like black omens against the Montana sky. What Johnson finds inside that cabin would break most men completely. Swan has been mutilated, according to Crow warfare customs, not just killed, but desecrated in ways designed to ensure her spirit could never find peace. The unborn child. Well, some details are too dark, even for a story like this. But here's where Jeremiah Johnson reveals what truly sets him apart from ordinary men. The scene doesn't trigger blind rage or emotional collapse. Instead, it triggers something far more dangerous, cold, methodical calculation. Johnson stares at the horror before him and begins planning something unprecedented in frontier warfare. Most men would have grabbed their rifles and charged off, seeking immediate vengeance. Johnson does something that chills the blood of even hardened mountain men when they hear about it later. He begins a methodical 20-year campaign, where he not only kills Crow warriors, but consumes their livers raw, adopting and weaponizing their own spiritual beliefs about consuming enemy essence. Think about the psychological warfare here. The Crow believed that eating certain organs of a defeated enemy would steal their strength and trap their spirit. Johnson takes this belief and turns it into a weapon of terror. He doesn't just kill his enemies, he devours them in ways that violate their deepest spiritual convictions. But becoming the frontier's most feared predator requires more than vengeance. It demands knowledge that goes beyond anything taught in civilized society. Johnson seeks out John X. Garrison, a legendary mountain man whose very existence was questioned by some. Garrison claimed to have learned preservation and consumption techniques from an isolated Arctic tribe during a winter when he was trapped north of the tree line for 8 months. Whether his story was true or not, his knowledge was undeniable. He could consume meat that would kill other men, survive in conditions that claimed entire expeditions, and maintain perfect health while living exclusively off raw animal products. But the real transformation happens when Johnson undergoes spiritual preparation with Eagle Feather, a Shoshone medicine man whose people maintained ancient practices that stretched back to the very dawn of human civilization. We're talking about knowledge that predates agriculture, predates settled civilization, predates everything we think we know about human dietary evolution. The ritual preparation lasts 40 days and nights. Imagine the most intense physical and spiritual ordeal you can conceive, then multiply it by 10. Johnson experiences fever dreams that would drive most men insane, purification rituals that push his body to the very edge of death, and dietary transitions that fundamentally alter his physiology at the cellular level. His body begins producing enzymes in quantities that shouldn't be possible. His digestive system adapts to neutralize harmful bacteria and parasites. His immune system develops resistances that border on the supernatural. This isn't just learning to eat raw meat. This is evolutionary adaptation compressed into weeks instead of millennia. Eagle Feather teaches him techniques that sound like something from a medical textbook written by shamans. Specific organ selection based on lunar cycles, consuming heart during the new moon for courage, liver during the full moon for strength. The combination of raw meat with wild herbs that enhance digestion and boost immunity. The critical 48-hour window for safe consumption after an animal's death. Johnson learns to read an animal's health through subtle signs that would escape modern veterinarians. The color of the eyes, the texture of the fur, the scent of the breath. He selects only the strongest specimens, understanding that weakness in prey translates to poison in the predator. His journals from this period read like a combination of scientific observation and mystical revelation. He documents consuming raw bear fat to survive winters that killed other trappers, fresh fish eyes for essential nutrients that prevent scurvy, raw bone marrow for sustained energy that lasts for days. Most remarkably, he develops immunity to trichinosis through gradual exposure combined with wormwood consumption, a practice he learned by observing wolves. Think about that for a moment. He watched animals that had evolved over millions of years to consume raw meat, and he adapted their techniques for human use. The transformation goes beyond the physical. Johnson's mental state shifts into something that can only be described as predatory enlightenment. He begins thinking in ways that transcend normal human psychology. Time moves differently for him. Pain registers differently. Fear becomes foreign. By the end of his training with Eagle Feather, Johnson has become something that exists in the space between human and animal, between civilized and wild, between natural and supernatural. He's still recognizably human, but he's human in the way a wolf is canine, perfected for a specific purpose that civilization has forgotten. The Shoshone have a ceremony for his graduation from this ancient knowledge. They paint his face with symbols that mark him as a bridge between worlds, a creature who can walk in both the realm of men and the realm of spirits. Eagle Feather tells him that he now carries the responsibility of an apex predator to maintain balance, to take only what is needed, and to remember that power without wisdom leads to madness. Johnson accepts this responsibility with the same methodical calm he brought to planning his vengeance. He understands that he has become something unprecedented in the modern world, a human being who has successfully reversed thousands of years of evolutionary adaptation in a matter of weeks. But knowledge this powerful comes with a price. The isolation becomes absolute. No woman will have him now that word of his dietary practices spreads. No normal man can truly comprehend what he's become. He exists in a category of one, serving purposes that only he can understand. And the Crow, warriors who killed his wife. They're about to discover what happens when ancient wisdom meets modern vengeance, when spiritual power combines with technological superiority, when a man becomes something that their worst nightmares couldn't imagine. The hunt is about to begin in earnest. By 1860, Jeremiah Johnson controls territory that would make modern corporations weep with envy. We're talking about 300 miles of the richest trapping grounds in North America, stretching from the Yellowstone River north to the Canadian border. But here's the thing, it's not just the land he controls, it's how he controls it. His unique abilities grant him access to regions where other trappers starve, freeze, or simply disappear into the wilderness forever. Johnson's method has evolved into an exact science that would impress modern nutritionists if they could stomach the reality of it. Morning consumption of raw liver for immediate energy that hits his bloodstream faster than any stimulant. Afternoon marrow for sustained strength that carries him through physically impossible exertion. Evening heart meat for endurance that allows him to travel distances that should kill a man his age. Army scouts report finding his camps, but they're identifiable only by meticulously cleaned bones, arranged with surgical precision. No fires, no cooking implements, no waste, just evidence of someone who has turned butchering into an art form and consumption into a spiritual practice. The advantages multiply in ways that give him strategic superiority over every competitor. While other trappers lose weeks to scurvy, that terrible wasting disease that turns strong men into toothless invalids, Johnson maintains perfect health through raw organ consumption. His immunity to common frontier diseases becomes the stuff of legend after he nurses sick trappers while consuming the same questionable meat that poisoned them. Think about the psychological impact here. Imagine you're a fellow trapper, weakened by poor nutrition and constant illness, watching Johnson thrive in conditions that are destroying you. It's not just demoralizing, it's reality-altering. Men begin to question everything they thought they knew about human survival. Trading posts from Fort Laramie to Fort Benton begin stocking specific herbs he requests. Wild sage, wormwood, juniper berries, ingredients that sound like a witch's shopping list, but are actually components of his preservation and digestion system. The traders have no idea what they're facilitating, but Johnson's gold spends as well as anyone's. Native tribes split between viewing him as cursed or blessed, and this division becomes strategically useful. The Shoshone protect him, seeing him as a bridge between the human and spirit worlds. They believe his transformation marks him as chosen by the Great Spirit for purposes beyond ordinary understanding. The Blackfoot, on the other hand, fear him as a Wendigo adopter, cannibalistic forest spirit that was once human, but has become something else entirely. Their warriors whisper stories of finding crow bodies with the livers surgically removed, consumed according to rituals that violate every sacred law they understand. This reputation becomes armor more effective than any steel. Johnson can travel through territories where entire expeditions vanish without a trace, protected not by weapons but by spiritual terror. Even war parties think twice before attacking someone they believe might not be entirely human. The relationship with young Army Doctor Samuel Crawford provides fascinating documentation of what Johnson has become. Crawford, assigned to study Johnson's remarkable constitution, keeps detailed medical records that read like science fiction. Body temperature consistently 2 degrees above normal, suggesting a metabolism that operates at superhuman efficiency. Wound healing that occurs at rates Crawford has never observed in 20 years of proper frontier medicine. Blood that resists infection, even when exposed to contaminated instruments that would give other men gangrene. Johnson selectively shares certain techniques while protecting crucial secrets, understanding that partial knowledge creates dependency rather than competition. He teaches Crawford how to identify healthy organs for consumption, how to prepare certain herbs for digestive enhancement, how to recognize the signs of parasitic infection before they become fatal. But he never reveals the complete system, never explains the spiritual components that make physical adaptation possible, never shares the knowledge that could transform another human being into what he has become. His arrangement with the army demonstrates masterful negotiation skills that belie his savage reputation. In exchange for teaching specialized winter survival techniques to select units, he receives unlimited ammunition, protected status in territorial disputes, and most importantly, official documentation that legitimizes his presence in regions where civilians are forbidden. The army gets soldiers who can survive in conditions that previously claimed entire companies. Johnson gets institutional protection and resources that support his increasingly elaborate operations. It's a partnership that benefits both parties while revealing Johnson's sophisticated understanding of civilized power structures. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this period is Johnson's ability to maintain his humanity while living as something beyond human limitations. He develops friendships with fellow mountain men, albeit relationships based on careful boundaries. He shows mercy to enemies who demonstrate courage or honor. He maintains a moral code that, while foreign to civilized society, operates according to consistent principles. His cabin becomes a neutral meeting ground, where men of different tribes and backgrounds can conduct business without fear of violence. Johnson's reputation for absolute fairness in trading relationships becomes legendary. His word is considered more reliable than written contracts, his judgment more trustworthy than territorial courts. This isn't the behavior of a mindless savage. This is a man who has successfully integrated primitive capabilities with sophisticated social intelligence. He understands that true power lies not in the ability to inspire fear, but in the wisdom to know when fear is unnecessary. The psychological complexity of his position becomes apparent in his careful management of relationships with various communities. Among the Shoshone, he participates in spiritual ceremonies and respects traditional protocols. With army personnel, he maintains the facade of an eccentric but ultimately civilized frontiersman. Among fellow trappers, he projects competence and reliability while concealing the full extent of his transformation. Johnson has become a master of multiple worlds, capable of shifting between different versions of himself depending on the social context. This adaptability suggests intellectual capabilities that complement his physical advantages, creating a combination that makes him nearly unstoppable in any environment. But this period of dominance and control is about to face its greatest challenge. The frontier that made Johnson possible is beginning to change in ways that will test every advantage he has cultivated. The railroad is coming, bringing with it civilization, law, and limitations that will force him to adapt once again. And adaptation, as Johnson has learned, always comes at a price. The Transcontinental Railroad changes everything, and Jeremiah Johnson adapts one final time. It's the 1890s, and the frontier that created men like Johnson is closing faster than a bear trap. The wild spaces that once seemed infinite are being carved into territories, then states, then counties with sheriffs and laws and all the complications of civilized society. But Johnson? Johnson transitions from wild mountain man to living curiosity with the same methodical precision he's applied to everything else. Here's a man who should be dead 10 times over, who's survived 20 years of warfare that would break professional soldiers, who's lived off raw meat in conditions that killed younger, stronger men, and now he's 70 years old in an era when mountain men rarely survive past 40. The reporters come first, drawn by stories that sound too incredible to be true. Eastern newspapers send correspondents west to interview this legendary figure who supposedly eats raw meat and communes with wild animals. They expect to find either a fraud or a madman. Instead, they encounter something that defies their ability to categorize. Johnson performs calculated demonstrations that leave audiences stunned into silence. He'll casually consume raw rattlesnake before astounded crowds, explaining the nutritional benefits while they try not to vomit. He'll identify edible plants and roots that most folks would never recognize, describing their medicinal properties with the precision of a trained botanist. But he always maintains the mystery, always reveals just enough to preserve his legend while protecting the crucial secrets that made his transformation possible. He understands that complete revelation would destroy the very mystique that gives him value in this new world. The scientists arrive next, drawn by reports of his impossible longevity and superhuman constitution. Medical researchers from Harvard and Yale make pilgrimages to study this anomaly that walks among them. They measure his reflexes, test his blood, document his physical capabilities with instruments that reveal the impossible. His bone density exceeds that of men half his age. His immune system produces antibodies they've never encountered. His digestive system processes nutrients with efficiency that shouldn't be possible in a human being. The data contradicts everything they understand about aging, nutrition, and human physiological limits. Yet Johnson controls these interactions with the same strategic thinking he's always employed. He allows certain tests while refusing others. He shares insights that advance scientific understanding while concealing knowledge that could prove dangerous in the wrong hands. He's become a living bridge between ancient wisdom and modern science. The most surprising development is his friendship with Crow chief Red Cloud, beginning in 1884 during treaty negotiations in Washington. Imagine the dramatic irony here: two old warriors, one who has spent decades killing the other's people, meeting not on the battlefield but in the corridors of political power. Their first encounter occurs during a formal dinner at the War Department. Red Cloud, now a respected tribal elder trying to secure better conditions for his people, recognizes Johnson across the room. The tension is immediate and electric. Everyone present understands they're witnessing a moment that could explode into violence. Instead, Red Cloud approaches Johnson and speaks a single word in Crow: Daka Axta Alua. It means liver eater. Johnson responds with perfect pronunciation: Daka Axta Alua. The acknowledgement hangs in the air like smoke from a peace pipe, What follows is a conversation that transforms decades of vengeance into mutual respect. Red Cloud declares Johnson's war honor satisfied, acknowledging that the systematic campaign against Crow warriors was conducted according to principles both men understand. The vendetta is complete. The spiritual debt is paid. They share raw buffalo heart in a ceremony that symbolizes the end of their conflict. But Johnson continues his dietary practices not from vengeance now, but from necessity. His body has adapted so completely to raw consumption that conventional food can no longer sustain him. This friendship reveals another layer of Johnson's complexity. Despite decades of warfare, he harbors no racial hatred. His conflict with the Crow was personal and spiritual, not ethnic. He can separate individual relationships from historical grievances in ways that demonstrate remarkable emotional intelligence. Johnson begins selective teaching of younger mountain men, passing on knowledge that could help them survive in an increasingly challenging environment. But he's careful about his students, understanding that his techniques require more than mere imitation. 3 men attempt his methods without proper preparation and die horribly, one from poisoning, one from parasitic infection, one from something the doctor couldn't even identify. These failures reinforce that Johnson's abilities required spiritual and physical preparation that can't be rushed or faked. His final years at the Old Soldiers' Home in California become a study in strategic legacy management. Johnson has outlived most of his contemporaries, but he uses this longevity to carefully document his experiences for future generations. He writes detailed journals that he gifts to the Smithsonian Institution, describing specific techniques for survival in extreme conditions. But the most dangerous knowledge, the spiritual preparation, the cellular transformation, the techniques that could create another creature like himself, he encodes in Shoshone symbols that only a few medicine men can interpret. On his deathbed in December 1899, Johnson makes a final request that surprises everyone present. He asks for raw elk liver, not mere nostalgia, but one last attempt to feed the creature he became. Witnesses report that his eyes clear and his strength returns just long enough for him to speak final words about feeding the old way. The military doctors who perform his autopsy discover organs that resemble those of a Croesus, 30-year-old man. His liver shows adaptations unknown to medical science. His digestive system contains enzyme production capabilities that shouldn't exist in human biology. His blood chemistry reveals compounds they can't identify. They conclude that Jeremiah Johnson represents either an evolutionary anomaly or evidence of human potential that civilization has forgotten. Their report disappears into government files, classified not because it threatens national security, but because it challenges fundamental assumptions about human limitations. His burial in the Montana wilderness follows his explicit instructions. Raw meat is included in his grave according to his wishes, ensuring that even in death he remains connected to the practice that defined his life. The location is kept secret, marked only by stones arranged in patterns that mean something to the Shoshone but nothing to casual observers. And so ends the story of Jeremiah Johnson, a man who proved that human beings are capable of adaptations that science doesn't understand, transformations that civilization has forgotten, and achievements that legend struggles to contain. He lived for 75 years in a time when 35 was old age. He survived warfare, disease, starvation, and exposure that claimed thousands of stronger men. He mastered techniques that allowed him to thrive in conditions that would kill modern humans equipped with the best technology available. But perhaps most remarkably, he maintained his humanity throughout a transformation that could have turned him into something monstrous. He developed a moral code that, while foreign to civilized society, operated according to consistent principles of honor, respect, and responsibility. Jeremiah Johnson became living proof that the line between human and superhuman isn't fixed, that with the right knowledge, the right preparation, and the right commitment, a person can transcend limitations that seem absolute. His story reminds us that civilization, for all its benefits, has cost, all us connections to capabilities that our ancestors took for granted. In Johnson's extraordinary life, we glimpse what human beings once were, and perhaps what we could become again. The question is, are we brave enough to pay the price that such transformation demands?